Good morning, friends and enemies. In today's video, we're going to run through my top 36 wide receivers for the 2025 fantasy football season. They will be broken down by tiers, as I've already explained throughout my rankings videos. They're not necessarily in order if they're in the same tier, but I'm talking about the general strategy of the way I'm looking at groups of wide receivers as I'm building my fantasy football team this summer. We did the same thing for the running back position a few days ago. That link will be in the show notes if you want to watch that video before this one or after this one. Either way, it's fine by me, as long as you do check it out. We'll also be doing an updated version of this video as we get a little bit deeper into the summer. So if you are new here and you want to watch that video as we creep closer to the drafts, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Let's start at the very top with tier 1. These are just simply the first round GOATs. We have Jamar Chase, we have Justin Jefferson, and we have CeeDee Lamb. No further explanation needed. These are the best wide receivers in football that are just in their prime right now. And we'll move on to tier number 2, which is a group of 5 guys. The way I would label these guys are I would feel great about them if they are my wide receiver 1. If I am building my team around them being my wide receiver 1, regardless of which part of the draft you get them in, we're going to feel good about it. That is Puka, that is Nico Collins, that is Amon-Ra St. Brown, that is Malik Neighbors, and that is Brian Thomas Jr. If any of these guys finished as the wide receiver 1 overall by the end of this year, there would be no surprise in my brain, all right? Nobody should be shocked if any of these guys ends up being the best player in fantasy football in 2025. We've been deep diving into some of the players that I think could actually break fantasy football leagues this year, and Puka is one of them. I'll be doing a video on that either next week or the week after that. So again, make sure you are subscribed. But yeah, these guys, if they are anchoring my team as my wide receiver 1, feel phenomenal about this tier. With Cooper Kupp out, I think Puka's probably going to play the Cooper Kupp role. Nico Collins, we are expecting a little bit of a bounce back for CJ Stroud in this Houston offense. No more Bobby Slowick. I think we're going to get a little more creative in the passing game here. Amon-Ra St. Brown is Amon-Ra St. Brown. The guy has been the wide receiver 3 in back-to-back seasons. Maybe he doesn't have the ceiling to get to wide receiver 1 overall, but maybe he does. Malik Neighbors coming off a 170 target rookie season, and now we get a little bit of a quarterback upgrade. Are you shitting me? We didn't add any pass catching competition there for Malik, so year 2 should be a movie for that man. Same thing with Brian Thomas Jr., one of the better rookie seasons of all time for a wide receiver, and now we have Liam Cohen coming into the offense. I just think there's no ceiling for what BTJ could be in 2025. Tier number 3. These are guys that I think you could build a strong team around if they are your wide receiver 1, but I don't know if I could make a great argument for them hitting the tier 2 ceiling. I would be pretty shocked if any of these guys finished as the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy. Again, if they are your wide receiver 1 on your team, the way that you built your roster, I'm feeling okay about that because you likely went elsewhere with your first pick or your first 2 picks. This is the tier of 4 guys. We have Drake London, we have AJ Brown, we have Ladd McConkey, we have Terry McLaurin. Now, I think you can make the case that Drake London probably belongs in tier 2, possibly. My only hesitation here is with Michael Penix, right? We have those splits of that 3-game sample size of Michael Penix being a starter, and I don't want everybody to just look at those 3 games and then say, that's what's going to happen for 17 games. I think Michael Penix is a fun player right now. I'm excited to see what he could do for my Falcons in 2025. I will say I'm a little bit concerned with the down-to-down accuracy consistency from Penix, right? His games at the end of the year last year, they weren't like amazing, and they were against 3 of the worst pass defenses in the NFL, and that's where Drake London really thrived. I will say Drake London's, a very, very high floor player, a very talented player. I just not sure I can make the case that he's like Nico Collins or Malik Neighbors level of talent. So you're going to be fine with him if he is your wide receiver 1, but I do think there should be a little bit of hesitation here. Vegas is also not very high on the Atlanta Falcons. We're a 7.5 win team. So just to put that in perspective, what they're really expecting from us overall. So it's Drake London, it's AJ Brown, it's Ladd McConkey, and it's Terry McLaurin. I think they all have their shortcomings. You know, you have AJ Brown, who is an extremely run-heavy offense. I, tweeted out this stat a few weeks ago that the Eagles last year, their pass rate, just the percentage of their plays that were passes, the lowest rate of any single team since the 2009 Jets. And everybody likes regression, positive regression, progression, all this, all that, all the other things. Yeah, just because it won't be the lowest of the last 15 years does not mean it won't be really, 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 really low still. So I have concerns about how much passing volume is actually available in this offense overall. And if they don't have that, then I don't see where the A.J. Brown ceiling can really come from if they continue to decide to give Saquon Barkley 25, 30 touches per game. Ladd McConkey, there's not a lot of holes in this. Like, I think second half of the year breakout, he was like incredible. He was averaging a ton of targets, a ton of receiving yards, was just very involved in every aspect of the field. I do think this is going to be an extremely run heavy offense again. And that's where like the ceiling kind of gets capped for a dude like Ladd McConkey. I also think there's something that needs to be said for there's injury concern. Ladd didn't get injured last year, but he has a long list of injuries dating back to college. And it's something that, like, you know, we love to say guys are injury prone or like this guy's due for an injury or whatever because they have that sample size of getting injured in the NFL. But when a rookie comes in, stays healthy, we kind of just like forget everything about the injury history in college. And that's actually what happened with like Puka, right? Like Puka was a guy who was injured in college often, frequently, right? Rookie year, had a huge rookie year, and then we kind of forget all about the injury history, and then he gets injured second year. So it's like something that I don't think you can forget about. But regardless, the Chargers offense, I still think is going to really, really heavily be dictated by the ground game. They draft Amari Hampton in the first round. They bring in Najee Harris. I think they're going to try to be as run heavy as they possibly can while still having success there. So I guess my question is like, how many targets can we really expect for Ladd McConkey? Again, though, like if he's my wide receiver one in full PPR, I'll feel okay about that. I'll feel fine about that. Same thing with Terry McLaurin. I think a lot of people are diving into the numbers and really, really like bending over backwards to talk about why Terry McLaurin's like not a great pick this year. I think it's as simple as like Jaden Daniels, you finally got a really good quarterback coming into year two, great deep passer, really matches with Terry McLaurin's strengths here. So like I'm trying not to overthink Terry. He's a top 12 guy for me. Moving into tier 4, and before we do so, just to let y'all know, our draft guide that we make every single summer will be going live on August 1st, but we will have pre-order pricing, really, really heavily discounted promotions going live within the next few days. So if you want to be notified when we do go live with that, if you want to get it at its absolute cheapest price, again, the draft guide has all of our rankings, regardless of what type of league, scoring, or settings that you're in, our must-draft players, our list of players that we're fading, plus a bunch of other tools and stuff that will be really, really, really useful for you guys. There's a link right down below. It'll be the first thing in the show notes that'll say like pre-order, draft guide, discount, whatever. Put your email in that, free to do that, obviously. We will just notify you when that really heavily discounted draft guide pricing goes live later this week. Tier 4, this is a group of 6 guys. These are the best wide receiver 2s available. However, if you are fading the wide receiver position up to this point, I'm a little bit nervous about having these guys as my wide receiver 1. So I would not suggest fading the wide receiver position up to the point where these are your ones. And that is JSN, T. Higgins, Mike Evans, Rashee Rice, Devontae Adams, and Garrett Wilson. JSN's a very, very high floor player. I do think there's a little bit of systemic risk here, just being in the Seattle passing offense. I don't know what to expect from them there. I think he'll get a ton of targets with Lockett and DK Metcalf, obviously out of the situation. With Cooper Kupp coming in, I'm imagining they're going to play him in the slot a lot. Although the way that offense runs, it could be a lot of both guys in the slot and a lot of bunch formations where no one's really like an outside perimeter receiver. I will say, though, I'm a little bit more skeptical of JSN if he needs to play purely outside while Cooper Kupp is running the slot. T. Higgins is just a perennial wide receiver 2. I know he put up wide receiver 1 numbers last year, and the Cincinnati offense is set up to smash, but I think historically T. Higgins is the wide receiver 2. So if he has a little bit less touchdown luck than he did last year, where he had like 3 touchdowns in a game, he will finish as like a top 15 guy, which is around where I have him. Mike Evans, I think you start to need to factor in the age, plus you add in another first-round wide receiver in Emeka Egbuka, and a lot of Mike Evans' numbers last year, let's be honest here, came when Chris Godwin was finally out. Mike Evans is good. He's great still. But I still think if Godwin is healthy, if Emeka Egbuka is an impact player like I think he's going to be, then Evans' ceiling is just not there to go far surpassing the 1,000-yard mark. Like maybe he goes 1,000 for 7, and again, that's like top 15 numbers, but doesn't need to be your wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. Rashee Rice is probably the biggest enigma in this tier. If he's fully healthy, like yeah, he's a top 10 guy for sure. The only problem with Rashee Rice is while everyone's saying he is fully healthy and he's like a full go, we don't have a lot of history of this specific injury and what type of impact it has with your play on the field, right? Like there are injuries where the return to playing is short, right? It doesn't take as long to get back to the field, but we don't actually know what the impact is, right? And I saw someone tweet a similar thread to this the other day that I thought was interesting. I thought was spot on, where it's like an Achilles tear, right? If you have an Achilles tear, you might be able to get back onto the field in 8 or 9 months. So the recovery timetable might not be that long anymore, but the impact of how explosive you are as a player is still minimized relative to maybe the ACL, where like the ACL tear might take you 8, 9, 10 months, but you're probably back up to speed relatively quickly, like performance wise, as soon as you get onto the field. And with Rashee Rice's injury, which was a PCL tear, we just don't have a sample size of receivers coming back from that injury. So I'm not saying he can't, and I'm not saying like I know whether or not the impact is going to be there. I just think it does present some risk that we just don't know about. So with Rashee Rice, you do have Xavier Worthy, who had a breakout last year. You do have Hollywood Brown, who they've re-signed for another year. So I think Rashee Rice's range of outcomes is very, 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 very wide. But yeah, he's the strongest of the wide receiver twos that you could find. Alongside Devontae Adams, love his fit in the Rams offense. Could be a very, very high touchdown scoring guy. I think last year he was very good on the Jets when Rodgers was actually connecting with him. And then you have Garrett Wilson, the other New York Jet, who will be the one there on gangrene. Justin Fields coming in, former college teammates, all that kind of stuff. I just think Garrett Wilson is not a guy that I want to rely on as my wide receiver one. Talent-wise, he's very, very good. He's as good as the guys in the tier above him. I just worry about this offense being super, super run heavy, not scoring a ton of touchdowns. I think Justin Fields' passing lines per BetMGM, it's like 2450 passing yards and 14.5 passing touchdowns. So like I'm trying to be reasonable with this. I know Garrett Wilson might get 175 targets and catch 110, 120, passes this year. So full PPR, he obviously gets a nice fat boost. But anything half PPR, I think like that becomes a little bit too touchdown dependent for a guy like Garrett Wilson for me to want to really go all in on him. Tier 5, a weird tier. I don't even really know how to label this. It's literally just two guys. It's Courtland Sutton and it is Tyreek Hill. Like, I don't feel strongly enough to put them in the tier above, but I think I like them way more than the guys in the tier below. That's really the only way I can describe it. I would say, like, I feel good. I feel good about them being my wide receiver 2, but I recognize the risks. And I think if you can get them as your wide receiver 3, you're feeling very, very, very good, right? So Courtland Sutton, again, I think once Bo Nix figured out the offense, weeks 8 through 18 last year, Sutton was a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. Bo Nix was a top 6 or 7 fantasy quarterback, second year in Sean Payton's system for Bo Nix. Like, I only think there's upwards to go for this entire Denver team, and I think they'll be even more of a well-oiled machine. Tyreek Hill, I think there are a ton of risks around Miami and Tua, and everyone wants to be like, it's Tyreek Hill, the talent, he'll obviously bounce back. I think there are a ton of concerns there. I think the way that defenses play them, I think Tua and his ability to not throw the ball deep anymore because of the way the defenses play him, towards December, January, when the weather gets cold, there are always concerns with how he plays. So I think the risks are there, but as a top 20 guy like Tyreek Hill, I can get behind that pricing. Moving into tier 6, this is a fat tier here. This is 10 guys. These are guys that I think you're swinging for some upside as your wide receiver 2, but very, very risky. I think I like them 1,000 times more as my wide receiver 3. I think the way that drafts are kind of shaping up, I don't feel great about having these guys as my wide receiver 2. So I would implore y'all, if you are drafting, especially in full PPR, to be looking at other options as your wide receiver 2. Get 2 wide receivers before you get to this tier of players. And it is a group of 10, as I already said. It's Marvin Harrison Jr., it is Devonta Smith, it is DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, George Pickens, Zay Flowers, Chris Godwin, DK Metcalf, Jawan Jennings, Jacoby Myers, and Jameson Williams. Now, obviously, this tier is just littered with different types of players in high passing situations like George Pickens in Dallas, but he's the wide receiver 2. You have unsure offenses and unsure like upside with a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. You have just really safe floor players like a Jacoby Myers. You have boomer bust upside players like a Jameson Williams. Devontae Smith, kind of the same problems I see with AJ Brown. They're just not a pass heavy offense, which really limits the ceiling. With Marvin Harrison Jr., I have real concerns about Drew Petzing being able to use him properly. Like, obviously the talent is there, and I'd like to predict the sophomore breakout here, but I don't feel confident that they're going to use him correctly after what we saw in year 1. It still might be Trey McBride leading this team in targets. With DJ Moore, you obviously have a lot of new faces, new personnel. Ben Johnson coming in for Chicago. They do lose Keenan Allen. They bring in Luther Burden and Colson Loveland, but DJ Moore realistically has done nothing but be the wide receiver 1 in every single offense that he's been in. And BetMGM lines, man, they got his receiving yardage all the way at 1050, which is amongst some of the best wide receivers in all of Vegas lines this year. So I think it is important not to fade DJ Moore too dramatically based on everything that he's done throughout his career so far. Calvin Ridley gets a new gunslinger in Cam Ward coming into the offense. Calvin Ridley's a guy that's gone back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. We're kind of fading him as a community just because he didn't live up to the ADP, but now you don't have to pay that price anymore. So I love Ridley as a 6th, 7th round pick as my wide receiver 3. Pickens, I think there's a world where the only thing that goes right for Dallas this year is statistics in their passing offense, and they might have to throw the ball 600 times, which will obviously lead to CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens getting a million billion targets. Zay Flowers, he's probably a better real-life player than an actual fantasy player, but he is kind of the manufactured touch guy in this passing offense that Lamar Jackson should end up, leading to another 35 passing touchdown season. If some of the touchdowns break right towards Zay Flowers, he could be a return on investment pick in fantasy. Chris Godwin, anyone's kind of guess as to how this season plays out for him. I think he's probably a 950 to 1,000-yard receiving guy, 70 catches, 6 to 8 touchdowns, which is exactly what you want from your wide receiver 3. He is coming back from another serious lower body injury. He had the ACL tear a bunch of years ago. He's got this serious lower body injury happening last year. And again, you add in the fact that you got Mike Evans there, you got Emeka Ibuka coming in as a first-round pick, it does get a little bit dicey in terms of the target share. I don't want anyone to overemphasize, like, what he did the first 7 weeks of last year is amazing, but we also have a sample size of Chris Godwin going back 5 years prior to that of what he really is, and that's, a wide receiver 2-3 in fantasy. So we like Godwin, but I think there are real risks here. DK Metcalf, kind of the only guy in Pittsburgh there. He should get a huge target share, but this is going to be a very, very, very run-heavy offense out here in Pittsburgh, and Arthur Smith just does not feed his wide receiver ones to the point where they could be super, super fantasy relevant. So I like DK Metcalf's floor. Juwan Jennings, I think, is a guy that has been in the league for a long time. We obviously saw a phenomenal stretch from him last year when most of their weapons are out, right? C-Mac was out. Brandon Ayuk got hurt. Deebo Samuel became too thick to actually be productive there. Ricky Pearsall missed some time. So it was like everything kind of broke right for Juwan Jennings. But at the same time, him and Purdy had real chemistry, and he looked really good. And I'm having a hard time, looking at the numbers and saying, like, how do we make a narrative where Juwan Jennings is not good this year? Deebo Samuel is out. Brandon Ayuk is likely going to start the year on the PUP, which is why he's not in this tier. So it's like Juwan could start out as the wide receiver 1 immediately in San Francisco in an offense that Vegas is projecting a really, really strong bounce back for. So I like Juwan. I like Jacoby Myers as well. You get the quarterback upgrade in Geno Smith, and he was already a good receiver for them last year in fantasy. Went over 1,000 yards. Great wide receiver 3. Jameson Williams really had his first full year where he was playing the full year. Went over 1,000 yards. This is, while everybody is talking about how Detroit's going to take a step back because they don't have Ben Johnson anymore, no more Frank Ragnow, I will bring up the point that, like, this is what everybody said for Philadelphia last year when they lost Jason Kelce. Like, oh, Jason Kelce, the splits without Jason Kelce are horrifying here. They were fine. Well, I think not having Frank Ragnow will impact them. Like, I don't want to overemphasize the fact that their personnel outside of him is still fucking incredible, and I still think they're going to have a very, 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 very good team and a very good offense. Let's not forget that Jameson Williams was the 12th pick in the NFL draft a couple years ago, and had he had the year this year or this previous year that, like, 2 years ago, we'd be really, really high on Jameson Williams, but because he had all these, like, random things kind of break wrong and he got unlucky the first couple years, suspension, whatever the case may be, we're looking at him a little bit differently, but the talent is very, very clearly there. So that wraps up tier 6. When we jump into tier 7, this is another fat tier. I'll say overall, just for the theme of wide receivers this year, as I look all the way into tier 8. So we have tier 7, which is another 11 players. Tier 8's like 8 guys after that. There are legit 52 players that I feel good about at the wide receiver position this year. Obviously, there are levels to it where, like, some guys I feel better about as my wide receiver 2 versus my 3 versus having them in a flex spot. But I think all the way down through wide receiver 52, which is through my tier 8, I feel like pretty phenomenal about having any of these guys in my starting lineup. If I have 2 legit wide receiver 2s that were ranked inside my top 20, and then my wide receiver 3 plus my flex 1, flex 2 are a mixture of these guys in tier 6, tier 7, and tier 8, I think you're building a very, very strong team. The wide receiver position, the depth this year in fantasy, and I'm not someone who says that every single year, this year feels like incredibly deep. So we'll jump quickly into tier 7. I know I said my top 36, but we're going to go into my top 43. And again, if you want to see tier 8, tier 9, those guys that you're getting a little bit later into drafts, you'll have to get that in the draft guide, which if you want a very, very heavily discounted price on that, or you want one of our partner promotions that gets it for an even cheaper price, go drop your email in the email list down below. First link in the show notes. We got tier 7, and that is Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Waddle, Josh Downs, Jordan Addison, Xavier Worthy, Tedero McMillan, Darnell Mooney, Stephon Diggs, Chris Olave, Rome Odunze, Brandon Ayuk, and Khalil Shakir. So with any of these guys, in my opinion, if you are relying on them as your wide receiver 3, it's a little bit nerve-wracking. I think they all have pretty clear flaws into who they are or what their situation is. But if you have these guys as your flex play, they're going to be permanent upside flexes for the entire year. Like, I feel phenomenal about a guy like Jalen Waddle in my flex, although I feel weird about him as my wide receiver 2 or 3 because I don't really trust the Miami situation in terms of them prioritizing him. Jonnu Smith being out of the way obviously kind of boosts his floor a little bit and probably boosts his involvement in the offense. But I think all of these guys have flaws. Like Jordan Addison, we're looking at, okay, what is J.J. McCarthy? Okay, is Jordan Addison going to be suspended for the beginning of the year for the first game, 2 games, 3 games? Xavier Worthy, what does he look like? What does his involvement look like when Rashee Rice is healthy, when Hollywood Brown is healthy? Tedero McMillan, like, yeah, he's a rookie. And he's a rookie. And we also don't know what Bryce Young is. He looked good over the second half of the year, but is he good enough to sustain a top 24 fantasy wide receiver? Jerry Jeudy, the quarterback situation's up in the air. Same thing with Josh Downs. Like, all of these guys are very, very talented. Most of them are more like situation-based, being in tier 7 as opposed to tier 6. Stephon Diggs coming off of the ACL tear. Chris Olave coming off the concussion concerns with quarterback concerns. You have Rome Odunze, didn't have a great rookie season. We also don't know what to make of Caleb Williams and this Chicago Bears offense, but we do like the situation enough that even a bad rookie year, I'm very, very willing to bet on a dude like Rome Odunze having a breakout year 2. Brandon Ayuk could be put on the PUP list. Khalil Shakir, love the situation. He's a dude where, again, tier 7, just because I named Jerry Jeudy or Jalen Waddle up above a dude like Khalil Shakir, these aren't necessarily like side-by-side rankings. I'm not really excited about taking this guy over that guy. They're all in this tier based on the way I feel about these players. Like I said, a little bit risky as your wide receiver 3, but I feel great about them being a permanent flex all year for you. So you could say Khalil Shakir is the wide receiver 43, but if you told me he was the wide receiver 32 in my rankings, I'm cool with that too, because this is a tier where they all feel the same to me. So I think you could build a roster where if any of these guys are your wide receiver 3, you could be fine because you've probably peppered other spots of your roster. But if they're not your wide receiver 3, if you already have 3 wide receivers filling out your roster and these guys are your flex, you're going to feel fucking phenomenal. So those are 43 wide receivers for the 2025 fantasy football season that I think you could litter your lineup with and have a very, very, very strong team based on the tiers that I have broken up for you. Again, if you want to see tier 8, tier 9, tier 10, those will be available in the draft guide. Goes live August 1st, but if you order it at pre-order pricing, which goes live in a couple days, I can notify you via email if you sign up to the list down below. That's where you get those, all right? Thank you for watching today. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Hit the button that looks like this if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in a couple days. Smoochies.